Uh, I'm Natalie. I hope it's okay if I speak English. My Swedish is not good enough to make a presentation. I'm an architect, as Tuva said before, and I'm the one who developed this tool, Common Ground, that we are going to use for the workshops. And this is the tool to encourage sustainable lifestyles in a city neighborhood, and it aims to facilitate dialogue and decision making. And this tool was developed more as academic research, and I tested it a few times. And this time is the first time when it's actually tested in more of this specific area and like practical field. So I will try to explain it very clearly, but if something is not clear, please just ask me. Yeah, so this is a small plan of what we're going to talk about. So we will discuss why we actually talk about more from the city perspective, and what is a sharing city, and what is sharing space, and then how the Common Ground tool works and how we're going to use it. And then we will have some warm-up exercise. Yes, so why do we actually discuss this topic? We all know that we face a lot of global environmental problems nowadays, and it's not a new thing, and we're not going to discuss it right now. But when I was doing my research, I came up to this sentence in one book, which I thought was hilarious, but it really represents how we live nowadays in the cities. And we are obviously responsible for a lot of those challenges with our urban lifestyles, how they are nowadays, how they exist. But we are not going to talk about challenges, we're going to talk about solutions. And sharing is one of the solutions for this problem. And for sure, sharing helps to use resources more efficiently, it's obviously. But as well, it adds this very important aspect to the term of well-being. It's a social aspect that is very important for human beings' life. And historically, as humans, we were used to share and collaborate, and we gathered the groups to survive harsh conditions. And bartending and swapping, they were common ways to exchange and trade goods. But for sure, after a while, with industrialization, when everything started to be very valuable, we started to have a taboo on sharing in a way. And sharing started to be a sign of poor, let's say. And it started to be considered that we share just if we can't afford to have something, which actually is not true, so we're going to try to challenge this aspect. So historically, city appeared as places to share and collaborate, where people came together to have, let's say, easier way to handle resources. And nowadays in the cities, we have all those systems that we just take for granted. We have public transport, and we have education systems, and we have waste management and sewage and things like this that are actually all the assets for sharing. And those are those commons that we have, and we don't really reflect on them. And what we aim with these workshops is actually to broaden this concept of sharing in the city and see what we can add to this list in a simple way, and what are the resources that we already have. Yes, so for sure this concept of sharing city adds to the debate about sustainability, and we talk a lot about greenery in the city. We are used to this discussion about the importance of green spaces, and then we talk about smart solutions, like particularly in Gothenburg. It's a very big topic for sure. It was industrial city, and it's a lot of research going on in this field. But sharing city is another layer that adds to sustainability, this very important aspect of social connections, and it basically adds to the democratic use of the city and a city being for all and not just for very exclusive groups who plan it. So what are those sharing spaces or spaces for sharing, and how do we create them? I made this simple kind of what's the word for this? Okay, yeah, so let's see the difference between public space and sharing space. Because public space is something that we are very used to talk about in the city, but basically who owns this place and who uses this space. And often those are the spaces that don't feel safe, or we don't have sense of belonging. But if we want to develop this concept of sharing spaces in the cities, it's basically the space that can have collective use and therefore collective care and sense of ownership for everyone. And how are we going to create this? So there are simple questions we need to answer. It's what should it be? Where should it be? Who is responsible for this, or not responsible, but who can participate or like add to this discussion? And how are we going to do that? Yes, so let's look at the city again. And there are several levels in the city and what we already share there. So on the bigger scale, for sure we have infrastructures and public spaces like public parks, or like how we have Slottskogen, for example, that is totally for everyone. Then we go to the neighborhood level, and then it's a bit different. We have schools and local libraries and maybe local parks and things like that. And then we have the next level is basically our block where we live, or house, where we also have a lot of facilities for sharing already that we are just very used to. Like we share laundry rooms and bike rooms, and we have recycling stations and things like that. So what we aim is to see what kind of facilities can be added to the city on all of those different levels. And here you can see just a list, like a small list of different examples, and Emma already talked about those examples and described some of them. And we would like to talk about what will fit actually to Maastrichtskaien and how it can function there. Yes, so what in the neighborhood can be shared? For sure we have spaces as physical space, and then we have people living there. And in this particular area, it's not just inhabitants who live here, but it's a city center, and for sure a lot of people are working here and having offices, but also a lot of people just using the space. And then in between this physical space and people who have certain activities, there is this bubble that we would call facility, and those are the things that we are searching for. And again, this facilities for sharing is the things that Emma was talking about in her examples before. Yes, and they can be divided in certain simple categories, like focused on food, or transportation, or work, or leisure. And where do we have the space for this? Like in every neighborhood we have different types of spaces. Some of them are private, semi-private, and some are public. And we have living houses for sure, and then we have culture institutions and offices and educational institutions, and different outdoor spaces. And like here in this area, for example, we also have commercial, which is totally different type of space, which maybe doesn't exist in every neighborhood. So we are going to map it and see how those spaces can be used more efficiently. because obviously some of the spaces use just part-time and they can be used more hours during the day. Some have lack of functions that maybe can be added, and so on. And then who is going to participate in this process? Like every neighborhood has basically these two parts of actors. It's partners and participants. And what we as a group represent here today, it's more of this group of partners. It's local planning authorities, and it's developing companies, and it's different initiatives and variety of companies. And then the participants is normally local people or people who are the users. And now we don't have this group represented, but our aim is just to start this discussion of how we can find the common ground between those partner groups. So you. And probably on the later stages, that would be nice to involve also local people in the debate. Yes, so the tool, now I'll describe how it will work. It's basically in the format of a board game, and this game aims to help us to map the resources that we have in the neighborhood and have a dialogue. So it looks like this. I don't have it physical with me here today, but you can see the picture. There is a board and a certain number of elements, and those elements they represent those parts we talked about before. It's physical places, and it's activities, and groups of actors and facilities. And then there's different sets of cards that help to facilitate the discussion. And this tool has three main principles. It's divided in 4 categories. As was mentioned before, it's food, transportation, work and leisure, where we can place the facilities. And then it has 2 layers. And one layer is where we map what we have. It's all the resources, all the physical resources, human resources, everything that exists in the neighborhood. And then on the next level, we try to create the intended situation or something that we would like to have in the future, or like ideal situation. And so basically we map the resources that we would like to have in the neighborhood, and then we see the difference, what are we missing and what we can already use. Yes, and this board is divided in these different parts according to the aspects that we are focusing on. Again, places, actors and facilities and activities. Does it make sense? Yes, I hope. Okay. So today we're not going to use the tool itself. We will just start the discussion and start to get to know each other and understand how it's possible to work together. And now we know some information about the area itself, Maastricht-Skeien, and some crash course in sharing economy and what are those spaces for sharing. And now our aim is just to meet and talk and have discussion and see what are the goals for the next workshop. And next week we will already use the tool. So next week the aim is to have this dialogue and to create this mapping about the Maastricht-Skeien area and see how we can implement those sharing facilities in this area and what it will benefit to the area and to the actors involved and how it will work. Yes, let's start. Or do you maybe have any questions? No? Yes, okay. So now we are going to be divided into groups. Emma, you want to describe how?
Ja, tack Natalie. Nu är det så här att nu är det ni som ska få jobba. Och vi har delat in er i grupper. Från 1:30 till ungefär 5:05. Vi ska vara tillbaks här 16:10 för en liten outro, lite summering. Så att helt enkelt det ni ska göra är, kom ihåg din siffra. Här är ni indelade i grupper. Hitta bordet. Här är 5, 4 och så finns 1, 2, 3 här ute. Och så kommer det också finnas, just det, Natalie.
Yes.
Ska du säga något om den?
I can show it on the screen.
Okej. Jag kan göra så här först. I varje grupp så finns det en person som har en stjärna vid sitt namn. Och det kommer vara ett extra öra. Så den personen kommer anteckna lite extra. Sånt som är viktigt för oss i testbädden att fånga upp. Och så kommer ni få en mall som ni ska fylla i under er diskussionsövning.
Yes. Yes, so we are going to be divided now into small groups. And in these groups we will have a mixture of different people from different companies with different aims and needs and visions. And basically we divided everyone into two biggest groups. It's fastighetsutvecklare and people who already work with sharing initiatives, the links initiative. And what do we want to see is what are the needs for each group and what are the resources that you already have. And you will receive this paper in each group where you can take notes about during your discussion. And here is some, like a, let's say, gradient. How is it moving from one group to another and from needs to resources? So basically, while discussing, you can find where to put your conclusions. Do you make sense? Do you understand what I mean? Or yes, like for example, okay, maybe that's a speculation, and I'm not the one to like have opinions here. But for example, if you're a developer company, perhaps you own the spaces. Perhaps you want to fill it with some functions, and perhaps someone has more work with functions but doesn't have space. So kind of things like this. So we want to see if there is some needs or some resources that actually match, where people can collaborate on this aspect of sharing facilities. That's just an example, but yeah, I guess you will come up with your own conclusions during discussion.